Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. The Walls Have Eyes. Scary story published by Scary Fiction. Read for you by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. Inheritance and Unease. The wind howled like a banshee across the desolate Maine coastline, whipping salty spray against the windshield of Thomas Thorne's aging Volvo. Beside him, his 12-year-old daughter, Lily, hugged her knees to her chest, her eyes wide with apprehension. In the back seat, his 16-year-old son, Ethan, scowled out the window, headphones blasting music loud enough to drown out the world, or at least try to. Blackwood Manor loomed ahead, a silhouette of jagged stone against the bruised twilight sky. Its spires seemed to pierce the clouds like accusing fingers, and the peeling paint on its once grand facade resembled weeping sores. It was a monstrosity, utterly out of place amidst the quaint seaside cottages that dotted the coast. Thomas, however, saw potential, a fresh start. After his wife's tragic accident 6 months prior, the bustling city life had begun to suffocate him. He craved quiet, a chance to heal for himself and his children. This inheritance, from a distant relative he barely knew, had seemed like an answer to a prayer. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to sense the mansion's malevolent energy. As they pulled through the rusted iron gates, a sudden gust of wind slammed a heavy oak door shut with a resounding boom that echoed through the skeletal trees lining the drive. Lily whimpered, clutching Thomas's arm. "Don't worry, sweetie," Thomas murmured, forcing a smile. It felt hollow even to him. "It's just an old house settling." Ethan, oblivious in his world of amplified bass, ripped off his headphones and rolled his eyes. "Seriously, Dad, this place is a dump. How long do we have to pretend it's some kind of dream home?" Thomas gritted his teeth. Ethan hadn't been taking his mother's death well, retreating into a world of sullen anger. He understood, but his tone stung all the same. They unloaded the car in an unsettling silence. The only sounds the mournful cry of gulls and the rhythmic crash of waves against the rocky cliffs below. As they entered the cavernous foyer, a thick layer of dust swirled in the dim light filtering through grimy windows. The air hung heavy with the smell of damp earth and decay. Lily shivered, her voice barely a whisper. "It feels wrong in here, Dad." A shiver ran down Thomas's spine, too. There was an undeniable, oppressive energy within these walls. Ignoring the disquiet gnawing at his gut, he forced a smile. "Just need some airing out, that's all. Think of all the adventures we can have exploring this place." He tried to sound enthusiastic, but the words rang hollow in the vast emptiness. As he flicked a light switch, a single bulb sputtered to life, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the dusty floor. A faint creak echoed from somewhere deep within the house, followed by the distant patter of something scurrying across bare floorboards. Ethan looked around in disgust. "There's probably rats," he muttered, slipping past them and heading towards a shadowed hallway. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the house, extinguishing the lone bulb and plunging them into darkness. A shriek pierced the silence. Lily's. Thomas fumbled for his phone, the weak flashlight beam revealing Lily huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with terror. "It's okay," Thomas croaked, pulling her close. It was just the wind. But as he looked around, he couldn't shake the feeling that something else was watching them, something with unseen eyes lurking within the very walls of Blackwood Manor. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Walls. The faint glow of Thomas's phone barely penetrated the suffocating darkness. Lily clung to him, her sobs echoing in the vast emptiness of the foyer. Ethan, his silhouette visible by the phone's light, scoffed. "Seriously, Lily, a little dark, and you lose it." His harsh tone did little to ease the prickling sensation creeping up Thomas's spine. He fumbled for the light switch again, a flicker of relief washing over him as the bulb sputtered back to life. The shadows retreated, momentarily revealing the oppressive grandeur of the room. Days bled into weeks, and Blackwood Manor seemed determined to make them regret their arrival. Unexplained occurrences became commonplace. Doors creaked open on their own, slamming shut with a bone-jarring thud. Objects vanished from their places, only to reappear in the most unexpected corners. The silence that often descended upon the house was broken only by whispers, disembodied voices that seemed to slither through the air vents, weaving tales of forgotten things and unseen horrors. Lily bore the brunt of it. She'd wake up screaming, insisting she'd seen eyes watching her from the shadowy corners of their rooms. Pale and drawn, she started spending more and more time with her nose buried in a book, seeking solace in a world far removed from the unsettling reality of Blackwood Manor. Ethan remained stubbornly skeptical. He scoffed at Lily's claims, attributing them to overactive imagination. "It's an old house, that's all," he'd say, his voice laced with the anger that simmered just beneath the surface. "Houses creak, things get misplaced. It's not a ghost story." Thomas wasn't so sure. He, too, had heard the whispers, faint and chilling, speaking in a language he couldn't understand. He'd seen objects move inexplicably, witnessed a shadow dart across the hallway just beyond the reach of his vision. One night, as he lay in bed, unable to sleep, particularly loud whisper echoed through his room. It seemed to come from the wall itself, right beside his head. He bolted upright, heart pounding, scrutinizing the shadowed surface. Was it a trick of the light? A figment of his frayed nerves? Suddenly, a faint, almost imperceptible luminescence flickered within the textured wallpaper. It wasn't a light source, but rather an internal glow emanating from within the wall itself. And for a horrifying split second, he saw them, the eyes. Two pale ovals, devoid of pupils, staring back at him with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. He blinked, the image vanishing. Had he imagined it? But the lingering dread was undeniable. He looked over at Lily, her face pale in the moonlight filtering through the window. Her eyes were wide open, fixed on the same spot on the wall where he had seen the eyes. "Did you?" she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Did you see them too?" Tears welled up in her eyes. In that moment, beneath the watchful gaze of the unseen eyes in the wall, Thomas knew they were both trapped in a nightmare they couldn't wake from. Chapter 3: Secrets Unearthed. The weight of Lily's terrified whisper hung heavy in the air. Thomas, his heart hammering against his ribs, sat numbly on the edge of the bed. Denial, a flimsy shield he'd clung to for weeks, shattered into a million pieces. They weren't alone. Sleep eluded him that night. Every rustle of wind, every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He spent the night pacing, his eyes flitting across the shadows, searching for a flicker of movement, a sign of the unseen eyes. By morning, a tense silence had settled upon the house. Lily, exhausted from the night's terror, slept fitfully. Ethan, unsurprisingly, was missing. Frustration gnawed at Thomas. They needed to get out, find a hotel, anywhere away from this suffocating atmosphere. But a strange sense of morbid curiosity held him back. What secrets did these walls hold? Could understanding the darkness within somehow dispel it? He found Ethan in the attic, a dusty beam of sunlight illuminating his sullen face. The room was a treasure trove of forgotten things, antique furniture, shrouded in cobwebs, moth-eaten tapestries, and overflowing trunks spilling their contents onto the floor. In the corner, behind a toppled bookshelf, a narrow passage gaped open like a gaping maw. Curiosity piqued. Thomas followed Ethan through the passage. The air grew thick with dust and the smell of mildew. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the bowels of the mansion. Finally, it opened into a small, airless room. Ethan flicked on his phone's flashlight, revealing a scene of forgotten chaos. Papers and books were scattered across a rickety table, overflowing dusty shelves lining the walls. In the center, an ornately carved chest stood open, its contents spilling out tarnished silver instruments, a leather-bound book with its pages brittle and yellowed, and a collection of newspaper clippings bound with faded red twine. Thomas felt a prickle of unease crawl up his spine. This was the heart of this house's darkness. The room whispered secrets kept hidden for far too long. As he knelt to pick up a newspaper clipping, the faded headline screamed at him, "Blackwood Tragedy. Family found dead in ritualistic ceremony." His breath hitched. This wasn't a simple haunted house. This was something far more sinister. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, not just physical hunger, but a desperate thirst for knowledge. He needed answers, even if they confirmed his worst fears. Chapter 4. The Watching Eyes. Days bled into a feverish blur as Thomas delved deeper into the hidden room's secrets. The leather-bound book, a personal journal kept by the last resident of Blackwood Manor, spoke of a desperate attempt to banish an entity they'd accidentally summoned through a forbidden ritual. The entity, trapped within the walls, fueled by their fear and despair, had twisted their minds and ultimately driven them to a gruesome demise. The more he read, the less Thomas doubted Lily's claims. The whispers, once faint and indecipherable, grew clearer, weaving disturbing tales of imprisonment and vengeance. The flickering luminescence within the walls became bolder, forming grotesque shapes that resembled eyes following him through the hallways, mocking him from the shadows. The once skeptical Ethan started questioning his own sanity. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, the remnants of terrifying nightmares clinging to him. The dreams featured an amorphous, shadowy figure with glowing eyes, its voice a cacophony of whispers promising unimaginable torment. Sleep became a precious commodity, replaced by a constant, gnawing sense of dread. One night, as Thomas sat in the library, desperately flipping through dusty history books, searching for a solution, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence. He shot up, his heart pounding against his ribs, and raced towards the source Lily's room. He threw open the door to find her huddled on her bed, face buried in her pillow, her sobs echoing through the room. Her terrified gasps were punctuated by chilling pronouncements emanating from the very walls themselves. "Let me out," the voice boomed, a distorted chorus of whispers weaving together. "Release me from this torment." The luminescence flared, revealing dozens of glowing eyes boring into them from all corners of the room. The air crackled with a malevolent energy, tightening around their throats like an invisible noose. Panic clawed at Thomas's throat. This wasn't a haunting, it was a siege. The entity was no longer content with lurking in the shadows. It was demanding their attention, their fear. Denial was no longer a shield, it was a crumbling wall. This house, this entity, was real. Real and terrifying. He scrambled to his feet, a primal urge to protect his children warring with a paralyzing fear. He had to do something. He couldn't let the entity win. But what? The book, the ritual, a desperate flicker of hope ignited in his mind. The very thing that trapped the entity might also be the key to banishing it. Chapter 5. Descent into Darkness. The voice that echoed from within the walls had faded, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Lily, trembling in her bed, finally peeked out from under the covers. Her eyes, wide and red-rimmed, met Thomas's. A silent understanding passed between them. The entity was real, and they were no longer safe. The events that unfolded next were like a descent into a nightmare. Days blurred into nights, punctuated by terrifying occurrences. Objects would vanish and reappear in impossible locations. Doors slammed shut on their own, trapping them in hallways. The flickering luminescence within the walls grew bolder, forming grotesque visages that followed their every move. Then it started with Lily. An inexplicable pull drew her towards a particular room at the end of a dusty corridor. Despite their warnings, despite the terror etched on her face, Lily felt compelled to enter. Thomas and Ethan followed, their hearts hammering in their chests. The room was devoid of furniture, save for a single ornate circle scrawled onto the dusty floor in what looked like dried blood. As Lily hesitantly stepped within the circle, the air crackled with a malevolent energy. The whispers returned, no longer a disembodied chorus, but a single pleading voice. "Help me," it rasped, echoing off the bare walls. "Release me from this torment." Lily, eyes wide with a strange lucidity, looked up at the glowing eyes embedded in the ceiling. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady. A wave of despair washed over the room. "I was foolish," the voice confessed, the whispers weaving a tale of a bygone era, a misguided ritual performed to cheat death, and an unimaginable price paid. "Now I am trapped, bound to these walls, consumed by rage and despair." Their fear morphed into a sliver of empathy. This entity, once a desperate soul, was now a prisoner of its own making. But empathy didn't erase the danger. The mansion itself seemed to react to their newfound understanding. The air grew thick with a suffocating pressure. Paintings rattled on the walls, and furniture began to topple over. Suddenly, Ethan, his youthful bravado replaced by a steely resolve, grabbed his father's arm. "We have to help it, Dad. Maybe then it will leave us alone." A flicker of hope ignited in Thomas's chest. Maybe there was another way, a way to break the cycle of fear and violence. But the question remained how. Chapter 6, Forbidden Knowledge. Driven by a desperate need to protect his children and a sliver of newfound empathy, Thomas dove back into the cryptic journal entries in the hidden room. Days bled into nights. As he scoured the brittle pages, the flickering candlelight casting grotesque shadows on the dusty walls. Sleep became a luxury he couldn't afford. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper in the wind, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. Lily, pale and withdrawn, seemed oddly connected to the entity, her dreams filled with fragments of its tragic past. Ethan, his initial bravado fading, stood by his father, a silent pillar of support. They were a family bound, not by normalcy, but by a shared terror. Finally, a glimmer of hope flickered in the darkness. Deep within the journal, a faded passage detailed a complex ritual, an inverse of the one that had imprisoned the entity. It spoke of offerings, of channeling positive energy to break the binding spell. A sliver of hope, tinged with trepidation, blossomed in Thomas's chest. But the warnings were stark. The ritual was dangerous, a delicate dance that could backfire spectacularly. It required specific ingredients, rare herbs mentioned only in obscure alchemical texts, a silver chalice, rumored to be buried somewhere on the windswept cliffs overlooking the house. And most importantly, it demanded unwavering focus and a belief strong enough to counter the entity's rage. The choice was agonizing. Did he dare attempt a ritual that might not only fail but potentially unleash an even more monstrous entity? Yet, the alternative was unthinkable. They were trapped, their lives a slow descent into madness at the mercy of the unseen. Hesitantly, Thomas shared his discovery with his family. Lily, her voice barely a whisper, agreed. "We have to try, Dad. It's our only chance." Ethan, his face etched with worry, nodded in agreement. The whispers within the walls grew frantic, laced with a chilling desperation. "Do not attempt this foolishness," they hissed, echoing through the hallways. "It will not end well. Release me, and I will leave you in peace." But Thomas's resolve hardened. This wasn't a promise he trusted. The entity was a creature of lies and manipulation. Freedom at such a cost was no freedom at all. He wouldn't give in to its threats. They would fight back, even if it meant playing with fire. Ignoring the entity's chilling pronouncements, Thomas began gathering the necessary items. A frantic search through dusty antique shops and occult bookstores yielded the rare herbs. Ethan, fueled by a newfound purpose, braved the storm-battered cliffs, unearthing the silver chalice from its hidden burial site. The stage was set. The air crackled with an unsettling energy as they prepared for the ritual in the same room where Lily had first communicated with the entity. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Thomas knew this might be their last stand, a desperate gamble against an unknown force. As he placed the silver chalice on the blood-drawn circle and started chanting the ancient words from the journal, a cold dread slithered down his spine. He could almost feel the entity's malevolent gaze burning into him, a silent scream of defiance echoing in the very fabric of the house. Chapter 7. The Ritual. The air crackled with an unnatural energy as Thomas chanted the ancient words, his voice a shaky counterpoint to the howling wind outside. Ethan and Lily stood beside him, their faces pale and resolute, each holding an herb-filled pouch ready to cast into the glowing circle. The whispers within the walls had morphed into a guttural roar, a sound that shook the very foundation of the house. Paintings tumbled from the walls, shattering on the floor. A rush of icy wind slammed every window shut, plunging the room into a suffocating darkness. Then, with a deafening crack, a swirling vortex of inky blackness materialized in the center of the circle. From the vortex emerged the entity. It was a grotesque parody of a human figure, its emaciated form shrouded in tattered robes that seemed to writhe with an independent life of their own. Glowing red eyes, devoid of pupils, burned with malevolent hunger. "Fools," its voice boomed, a cacophony of tortured screams that clawed at their minds. "You cannot undo what was done." A surge of adrenaline coursed through Thomas. Fear threatened to consume him, but he clung to the flickering hope in his children's eyes. He remembered the journals. The entity fed on fear, on negativity. They had to fight back with something stronger. "We are not afraid," he yelled, his voice hoarse but firm. He tossed the pouch of herbs into the swirling vortex, and a wave of soothing light emanated from the circle, momentarily pushing the entity back. Ethan and Lily, emboldened, followed suit, their pouches releasing a sweet, floral aroma that filled the room. The entity writhed in agony, its screams turning into a shrill, ear-piercing whine. "You cannot banish me," it shrieked, its voice dripping with venom. "I will feast on your deepest fears. You will destroy each other." With a chilling cackle, the entity unleashed tendrils of inky blackness, each one targeting a primal fear in its victim. Thomas saw a vision of his wife, her lifeless eyes accusing him. Ethan found himself trapped in a burning inferno, the flames licking at his skin. Lily was surrounded by monstrous spiders, their beady eyes glittering with hunger. For a horrifying moment, they faltered, overwhelmed by the entity's insidious attack. But then, a surge of love and determination washed over Thomas. He looked at his children, saw the terror mirrored in their eyes, but also the unwavering love they shared. "We are stronger together," he yelled, pulling them close. "We face this as a family." His words resonated with Ethan and Lily. They broke free of the entity's illusions, their love for each other a shield against its darkness. In unison, they chanted the final words from the ritual, channeling their positive energy into the silver chalice. A blinding light erupted from the chalice, engulfing the entity. It shrieked in a voice that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality, then imploded in on itself, leaving behind only an unsettling silence. As the light faded, Thomas, Ethan, and Lily clung to each other, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. Had they truly banished the entity, or had they simply trapped it once more? They didn't have the answer. But as the first rays of dawn crept through the battered windows, casting a faint glow on the blood-stained circle, a fragile peace settled over Blackwood Manor. The oppressive silence was no longer threatening, but filled with a cautious hope. They had faced their fears, and for now, they had emerged victorious. Chapter 8: Escape or Entrapment. Sunlight streamed through the dusty windows, painting long stripes across the blood-stained circle on the floor. The air, once thick with malevolent energy, now held a tentative peace. But a sense of unease lingered, a prickling sensation beneath Thomas's skin that refused to fade. They emerged from Blackwood Manor, shaken but resolute. The ordeal had left its mark. Lily clung to Ethan, her eyes wide and unfocused. Ethan, his usual bravado replaced by a haunted silence, stared out at the endless ocean with a newfound respect for its raw power. Thomas felt older, warier, the weight of the experience etched into the lines on his face. Leaving the house behind seemed like the only logical choice. Yet, a strange inertia held them captive. The entity was gone, or so they hoped. But the silence within the walls felt strangely unnatural, like a predator holding its breath before the final pounce. Days bled into weeks. The once grand rooms of Blackwood Manor echoed with an unsettling emptiness. Sleep came in fits and starts, plagued by nightmares filled with swirling shadows and disembodied whispers. One night, Thomas awoke with a jolt, a cold sweat clinging to his skin. He glanced across the room and saw Lily, her eyes wide open, staring intently at the wall. "Lily," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "What's wrong?" She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on a barely perceptible luminescence flickering within the plaster. A luminescence that seemed to form an eye. A primal scream ripped from Thomas's throat. Was it real? Or was it the lingering trauma, his mind playing tricks on him? He couldn't be sure. He scrambled out of bed, his heart hammering against his ribs. Rushing to Lily's side, he threw his arms around her, his voice cracking with a mixture of fear and desperate reassurance. "It's okay, Lily," he whispered, his own words lacking conviction. "It's just a dream. We're safe now." But as he looked into Lily's eyes, devoid of fear and filled with an unsettling calmness, a horrifying thought slithered into his mind. Were they safe? Or had the entity, in a final act of vengeance, trapped them within an illusion, a twisted reality where they believed they were free while remaining prisoners forever within the suffocating walls of Blackwood Manor? The faint, flickering eye in the wall seemed to wink, a silent confirmation of his darkest fear. The battle may be over, but the war, it seemed, was far from won.